Innocence has a price in the 41st millennium, and the Imperium collects it with ruthless efficiency. In the underhive of Necromunda, a child who has never seen natural light learns to strip a lasgun in 14 seconds. Her fingers, small enough to reach the weapon's most delicate components, work with the precision of someone twice her age. She does not know her real name. The Manufactorum overseers call her 77 Delta, and when she completes her quota of 40 weapons per day, she receives a ration bar that tastes of recycled protein and industrial lubricant. The other children in the assembly line do not speak to her. They learned long ago that friendship is a luxury that draws the attention of the taskmasters, and attention from the taskmasters means pain. This girl is 8 years old. In 3 years she will be old enough to hold the very weapons she assembles. In 5 years she will carry one into battle. In 7 years, if she lives that long, she will teach other children how to die for the Emperor. The Imperium does not call this child labor. It calls it early vocational training. The difference is not semantic. It is doctrinal, carved into the very foundation of imperial law with the same fervor that built the cathedrals on Terra. Children are not workers, they are investments. They are not soldiers. They are future assets. They are not victims. They are blessed with purpose before they are old enough to understand what purpose means. The Schola Progenium stands as the Imperium's most visible monument to this philosophy, but it is far from the only institution that feeds on young minds and bodies. From the forge worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus to the death worlds that spawn the Imperial Guard's most elite regiments, the machinery of war consumes children with an appetite that would shame the great devourer itself. Yet the Imperium does not merely use children, it transforms them, it sanctifies their suffering, it makes them grateful for the chance to bleed. On the agri-world of Morven Prime, children as young as 6 work 18-hour shifts in the grain processing plants that feed 3 sectors of the Imperium. Their small hands are perfect for reaching into the machinery when it jams, and their light bodies can crawl through ventilation shafts to clear blockages that would require expensive servitors to remove. The overseers tell them they are heroes, that every grain of wheat they process might feed a space marine, that their sacrifice keeps the Imperium strong. When a child is crushed in the machinery, as happens every few weeks, the overseers hold a brief ceremony. They tell the other children that the dead one has been blessed by the Emperor, that his sacrifice has meaning. They do not mention that his body will be processed into protein paste for the next week's rations. The children believe them. Why would they not? They have never known a world where adults tell them different truths. In the depths of Hive Tertius on Armageddon, children too young to hold a rifle are pressed into service as ammunition runners. They dart between trenches and bunkers, carrying bandoliers of bullets and power packs for lasguns, their small size making them harder targets for enemy snipers. The Astra Militarum calls them little eagles, a term of endearment that masks a grim calculus. A child killed while carrying ammunition represents a loss of 37 throne gelts in equipment and perhaps 6 months of basic training. A trained guardsman killed while fetching his own ammunition represents a loss of 14 years of conditioning, 3 years of specialized training, and approximately 4,000 throne gelts in equipment and medical augmentation. The mathematics are undeniable. The children do not understand the mathematics. They understand only that the older soldiers smile when they bring bullets quickly, and that speed means survival. Some of them begin to run faster than humanly possible, their small hearts hammering with stimulants that the medics inject to keep them useful. Their life expectancy drops to 18 months, but their efficiency increases by 23%. The Departamento Munitorum files these statistics under operational improvements. But it is in the Schola Progenium that the Imperium's use of children achieves something approaching artistry. The orphanages that dot every world in the Imperium serve as more than educational institutions. They are factories for producing faith, workshops for crafting loyalty so pure that it transcends reason itself. The children who enter these institutions do so carrying the weight of their parents' deaths, most often parents who died in service to the Emperor. They arrive broken, traumatized, desperate for meaning in a universe that has stripped away everything they knew. The scholar does not heal these wounds, it weaponizes them. Sister Superior Mordian watches the newest arrivals file into the orientation hall of the Schola Progenium on Vos Prime. 23 children, ages ranging from 7 to 13, their faces bearing the hollow stare of fresh grief. She has seen this expression thousands of times over her 40-year career as an instructor. It is the look of children who have learned that safety is an illusion, that love can be torn away in an instant, that the universe is vast and cruel and utterly indifferent to their suffering. In the secular institutions of ancient Terra, such children would have been offered therapy, comfort, time to process their trauma. The scholar offers something far more valuable. It offers them the chance to transform their pain into purpose. The orientation begins with prayer. Not the gentle, comforting prayers that might soothe a child's fears, but the harsh, demanding liturgies of the Imperial Creed. The children kneel on cold stone floors for 2 hours, their voices hoarse from reciting words they do not yet understand. Their knees bleed, their voices crack, some of them weep, though they try to hide it. Sister Superior Mordian watches them carefully, noting which children endure the discomfort without complaint, which ones help their weaker neighbors, which ones show the early signs of the fanaticism that will make them useful servants of the Emperor. After prayer comes education, though the scholar's definition of education would be unrecognizable to teachers from more civilized ages. The children learn to read, but only sacred texts and military manuals. They learn mathematics, but only as it applies to calculating firing solutions and supply logistics. They learn history, but only the glorious victories of the Imperium and the bitter price of heresy. Most importantly, they learn to think of themselves not as individuals, but as components in the vast machine of imperial glory. Their names are replaced with numerical designations. Their personal belongings are confiscated and burned. Their memories of life before the scholar are gradually eroded through careful psychological conditioning that the instructors call spiritual purification. The children adapt because children always adapt. They learn to find comfort in routine, strength in discipline, identity in service. By the time they are 10 years old, most of them cannot remember what their parents looked like. By the time they are 12, they cannot imagine wanting anything other than to serve the Emperor. By the time they are 14, they are ready to die for him without hesitation, and they consider this readiness the greatest gift they could possibly possess. Some of them are selected for the Adepta Sororitas, where their faith will be forged into a weapon as deadly as any bolter. Others join the Adeptus Arbites, where their loyalty will be used to enforce imperial law with uncompromising brutality. A few, the most promising, are chosen for the Officio Assassinorum, where their childhood trauma will be refined into perfect, emotionless killing machines. But most of them will join the vast bureaucracy of the Adeptus Administratum, where they will spend their lives processing the paperwork that turns living beings into statistics, resources into quotas, suffering into acceptable losses. They will do this work with joy because they have been taught that there is no higher calling than to serve the Emperor, and they will never question whether the Emperor they serve bears any resemblance to the ancient figure who once walked among humanity with compassion in his heart. The transformation is not without cost. The scholar's medical records, buried deep in archives that few are authorized to access, tell a different story than the propaganda films that glorify imperial education. Suicide rates among scholar students run 17% higher than the imperial average. Self-harm incidents occur at a rate of 3 per day in even small facilities. Psychological breakdown, classified as spiritual weakness in official documentation, affects nearly 30% of students before graduation. These statistics are not hidden out of shame, but out of operational security. The Imperium cannot afford for its enemies to know that its most fanatically loyal servants are also its most psychologically damaged. On the Forge world of Ryza, the children destined for the Adeptus Mechanicus undergo modifications that would be considered abominations on any civilized world. The youngest initiates, some barely out of infancy, receive their first mechanical implants before their bones have finished growing. The surgery is performed without anesthesia, not as an act of cruelty, but as a test of devotion. The children who scream are marked as weak. The children who endure in silence are marked for advancement. The children who smile during the procedure are marked for greatness. By the time these children reach adolescence, they retain little that could be called human. Their emotions have been dampened by neural implants. Their memories have been selectively edited to remove distracting experiences of love, play, or wonder. Their bodies have been systematically replaced with mechanical components that serve the Omnissiah's will more efficiently than flesh ever could. They do not mourn their lost humanity because they have been taught that humanity itself is weakness, that flesh is corruption, that the highest aspiration of any thinking being is to cast off the limitations of biology in favor of the purity of the machine. These children turned machines will grow up to design the weapons that kill millions, to build the ships that carry soldiers to die on distant worlds, to calculate the optimal ratios of human suffering required to maintain imperial productivity. They will do this work with the same emotional detachment with which they once endured their own surgeries, because they have been systematically stripped of the capacity to feel empathy for organic life. The tech priests who oversee their training keep detailed records of the modification process, not out of scientific curiosity, but to optimize the conversion of future children. They have determined that the optimal age for initial implantation is 4 years and 7 months, when the child's personality is still malleable but their motor functions have developed sufficiently to handle basic mechanical interfaces. They have calculated that children who retain fond memories of their parents require 17% more reconditioning than orphans. They have discovered that children who show artistic inclinations respond poorly to emotional dampening and should be redirected toward purely technical specializations. These calculations are performed by adults who were once children subjected to the same process, their childhood wonder and compassion transformed into cold efficiency by the very system they now perpetuate. But perhaps nowhere is the Imperium's use of children more systematically cruel than in the recruitment and training of its psychers. The black ships that prowl the galaxy in search of psychically gifted individuals do not distinguish between adults and children. A 6-year-old who accidentally sets fire to her bedroom with an uncontrolled burst of pyrokinesis is as much a threat to Imperial stability as a 40-year-old rogue psyker who summons daemons for personal gain. Both will be collected with the same ruthless efficiency. The children taken by the black ships face a journey that breaks most adult minds. Chained in psychically dampening cells that suppress their abilities so thoroughly that many forget how to speak, they are transported across the galaxy to Terra in voyages that can last months or even years. The ship's holds are packed with hundreds of psychers, their psychic screams creating a constant background of mental anguish that drives many of the crew to madness. The children, lacking the psychological defenses of adults, suffer more intensely than any other passengers. Many of them die during the voyage, their minds simply shutting down under the weight of terror and isolation. Those who survive the journey face trials that make the Schola Progenium seem merciful by comparison. On Terra, they are subjected to psychological testing that determines their ultimate fate. The strongest and most stable are selected for training as sanctioned psychers, a process that involves years of mental conditioning designed to transform their raw psychic talent into a weapon the Imperium can safely deploy. The weaker ones are fed to the Golden Throne, their souls consumed to maintain the psychic beacon that guides Imperial ships through the warp. The weakest are simply executed, their potential threat to Imperial security deemed too great to ignore. The children selected for sanctioned psyker training endure conditioning that would shatter most adult minds. They are forced to watch their fellow students die in training exercises, learning to view psychic death as an acceptable cost of education. They are subjected to artificial possession by carefully controlled daemon entities, teaching them to resist warp corruption through exposure to its most seductive temptations. They are forced to use their powers to kill live subjects, usually condemned criminals or captured heretics, learning to overcome any natural reluctance to take life. By the time their training is complete, these children have become perfect weapons in human form. Their empathy has been carefully excised, replaced with absolute loyalty to imperial doctrine. Their natural curiosity has been channeled into narrow specializations that serve military objectives. Their capacity for joy has been suppressed, leaving only grim satisfaction in duty well performed. They are no longer children in any meaningful sense, though their bodies may still be young. They are tools, crafted from human raw material but shaped entirely by imperial need. The Imperium celebrates these transformations as triumphs of human will over chaotic corruption. The children themselves, those who retain enough individual consciousness to have opinions, agree with this assessment. They have been taught that their suffering was necessary, that their lost innocence was a small price to pay for the privilege of serving the Emperor, that their psychological destruction was actually a form of spiritual rebirth. They believe these lessons because they have never been given any reason to doubt them. In the vast libraries of the Adeptus Administratum, clerks who were once Schola Progenium students compile reports on the efficiency of child utilization across imperial space. They calculate optimal ratios of education to indoctrination, measure the correlation between childhood trauma and adult loyalty, project future manpower needs based on current mortality rates among juvenile workers. Their reports are written in the dry, clinical language of bureaucracy, but behind every statistic lies a child's broken dreams. Every percentage point represents thousands of young lives consumed by the imperial war machine. These clerks perform their work with the same mechanical precision they learned as children, their capacity for emotional response to human suffering carefully excised through years of systematic conditioning. They see nothing wrong with treating children as renewable resources because they have been trained since childhood to see all human life in terms of utility to the Imperium. They are not monsters. They are products of a system that transforms natural human compassion into cold efficiency, and they execute their duties with the satisfaction of craftsmen who have perfected their trade. On distant battlefields, child soldiers march alongside adult guardsmen, their small hands clutching weapons nearly as tall as they are. They have been given stimulant injections to increase their aggression and neural conditioning to suppress their fear responses. Many of them will not live to see their 15th birthday, but they face death with the same grim determination as veterans twice their age. They sing imperial hymns as they charge enemy positions, their young voices rising above the thunder of artillery and the scream of dying men. The adult soldiers who fight beside them have learned not to form emotional attachments to these children. Experience has taught them that the young ones die first, their inexperience and small stature making them easy targets for enemy fire. But the children's enthusiasm for battle serves a purpose beyond their military effectiveness. Their willingness to die inspires the adults to greater acts of courage, their faith reminding hardened veterans why they fight. In the calculations of imperial command, a child who dies gloriously serves the emperor more effectively than one who lives cautiously. After each battle, the survivors help bury the dead children alongside the fallen adults, offering the same prayers and performing the same rituals. The Departamento Munitorum records their deaths with the same bureaucratic precision used for any other imperial asset lost in combat. Their names, when they are remembered at all, are carved into memorial stones that list them alongside the adults who died beside them, making no distinction between the seasoned warrior and the child who should have been learning to read instead of learning to kill. The families of these children, when they exist, receive the same death benefits paid to the families of adult soldiers. The official letters of condolence use the same formal language, praising the child's courage and dedication to imperial service. These letters do not mention that the child died screaming for their mother, or that they spent their last moments trying to crawl to safety through mud made from their own blood. Such details would serve no purpose beyond causing additional grief to bereaved families. In the depths of hive cities, children work in munitions factories where a single mistake could trigger explosions that would kill hundreds. Their small fingers are prized for their ability to handle the most delicate components of explosive devices, their natural agility allowing them to work faster than adult laborers. The factory overseers provide them with stimulants to keep them alert during 20-hour shifts, knowing that fatigue leads to accidents, and accidents lead to production delays that could affect supply lines across entire subsectors. The children who work in these factories develop respiratory diseases from constant exposure to toxic chemicals, nervous system damage from handling unstable compounds, and psychological disorders from the constant stress of knowing that any moment could be their last. The Adeptus Mechanicus medical staff assigned to these facilities treat their conditions with the same clinical detachment they would show toward malfunctioning machinery. Lung scarring is addressed with surgical modifications that increase oxygen efficiency. Nerve damage is corrected with bionic implants that restore motor function. Psychological trauma is treated with chemical mood stabilizers that eliminate fear responses while maintaining work productivity. These treatments are not provided out of compassion but out of economic necessity. A child worker represents a significant investment in training and conditioning, and allowing them to die from preventable medical conditions would waste Imperial resources. The children themselves are taught to be grateful for the medical attention, to see their modifications as gifts that allow them to serve the Emperor more effectively. Many of them do feel genuine gratitude, their understanding of their situation shaped entirely by Imperial propaganda and their lack of exposure to alternative perspectives. The most promising of these child workers are selected for advancement to supervisory positions, where they will oversee the next generation of juvenile laborers. These promoted children often display particular cruelty toward their former peers, driven by a psychological need to justify their own suffering by ensuring that others endure the same hardships. They implement productivity improvements that increase work quotas while reducing safety measures, calculating that higher mortality rates are acceptable if they result in greater overall output. The cycle perpetuates itself with mathematical precision. Children brutalized by the system grow up to become its most enthusiastic enforcers, their own traumatic experiences transformed into weapons they use against the next generation. They see no alternative to this pattern because they have never been shown one. They cannot imagine a world where children are valued for their potential rather than their immediate utility, because such a world exists nowhere in their experience. In the cathedral schools of shrine worlds, children kneel for hours in prayer while their knees bleed through worn fabric. They memorize scripture that teaches them to embrace suffering as a path to spiritual enlightenment, to view their pain as evidence of the Emperor's love rather than signs of abuse. The scars that cover their backs from ritual flagellation are worn with pride, visible proof of their devotion to Imperial doctrine. Many of them will carry these scars for the rest of their lives, constant reminders of the childhood they spent learning to worship their own pain. The priests who oversee their education were themselves raised in similar institutions, their capacity for compassion systematically destroyed through decades of indoctrination. They genuinely believe that the suffering they inflict on children is necessary for their spiritual development, that physical pain purifies the soul and prepares young minds to receive divine truth. They can recite extensive theological justifications for their practices, drawing on millennia of Imperial doctrine to support their methods. These priests keep detailed records of their students' progress, measuring spiritual advancement through tolerance for physical discomfort and enthusiasm for self-inflicted punishment. Children who show exceptional dedication to these practices are marked for advancement to positions within the ecclesiarchy, where they will spend their adult lives perpetuating the same cycle of sanctified abuse they experienced in their youth. The most gifted may even be selected for training as drill abbots, specialists in breaking down individual identity and replacing it with absolute submission to imperial authority. The process of creating these religious authorities requires the systematic destruction of everything that makes childhood precious. Curiosity is replaced with blind faith. Creativity is channeled into elaborate forms of self-punishment. The natural desire for love and acceptance is redirected toward an emperor who demands everything and gives nothing in return. The children who survive this process become perfect servants of the Imperial Creed, but they cease to be recognizably human in any meaningful sense. In the deepest vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, tech priests conduct experiments on children that would horrify even the most hardened Imperial Guard veteran. These experiments are not acts of sadism, but carefully controlled research projects designed to determine optimal methods for converting human consciousness into machine logic. The children used as test subjects are typically failed Schola progenium students, individuals who showed promise during initial screening but proved unsuitable for standard Imperial service. The experiments involve gradual replacement of organic neural tissue with mechanical components, monitoring the subject's retention of memory, personality, and cognitive function at each stage of the conversion process. The children are kept conscious throughout most of the procedures, their reactions and responses recorded for analysis. Those who maintain psychological stability through extensive mechanical modification are deemed successful test subjects. Those who suffer mental breakdown are classified as useful failures, their data contributing to refinements in future conversion protocols. The tech priests who conduct these experiments view them as sacred work, acts of devotion to the Omnissiah that will ultimately benefit all of humanity by advancing the knowledge of human-machine integration. They maintain detailed theoretical frameworks that classify the children's suffering as a necessary component of scientific progress, no different from the stress testing performed on mechanical components. The children's pain is data, their fear is a variable to be controlled, their humanity is an obstacle to be overcome in pursuit of perfect machine consciousness. Some of these experiments produce subjects who retain enough human consciousness to understand what has been done to them. These partial converts often beg for death, their remaining emotional centers overwhelmed by horror at their mechanical transformation. The tech priests typically respond to such requests by removing the subject's capacity for emotional distress, viewing their psychological suffering as evidence of incomplete conversion rather than grounds for mercy. The subjects who survive this final modification become perfect examples of Imperial efficiency, human intelligence guided by machine logic, utterly devoted to the Omnissiah's will, and completely incapable of experiencing regret for what they have lost. Across the width and breadth of Imperial space, the machinery of childhood consumption operates with relentless efficiency. Orphanages channel traumatized children into military service. Industrial complexes burn through juvenile workers like ammunition in a protracted siege. Religious institutions transform natural wonder into fanatical devotion. Military academies convert playground games into training for systematic violence. Medical facilities, experimental procedures that reduce children to laboratory specimens. Each institution operates according to its own logic, but all serve the same ultimate purpose: converting human potential into imperial power. The administrators who oversee these systems file regular reports on their efficiency, measuring success in terms of output rather than human cost. A Schola progenium that graduates 90% of its students to imperial service is considered more successful than one that graduates only 80%, regardless of the psychological damage inflicted on the survivors. A munitions factory that increases production by 15% is commended for operational excellence, even if the improvement comes at the cost of worker safety and life expectancy. These reports are written by adults who were themselves products of the same system, their childhood experiences of systematic brutalization transformed into professional expertise in managing similar institutions. They can calculate the optimal age for beginning military training, the most effective methods for breaking down individual identity, the precise dosage of chemicals needed to enhance productivity without causing immediate death. Their expertise is genuine, and their dedication to imperial service is absolute, but their humanity was sacrificed long ago on the altar of institutional efficiency. The children currently suffering in these institutions will grow up to become the next generation of administrators, their own traumatic experiences providing them with intimate knowledge of the most effective methods for processing human raw material into useful imperial servants. They will implement improvements based on their personal understanding of what breaks the human spirit most efficiently, their childhood suffering transformed into professional qualifications for managing similar programs. The cycle continues because it must continue. The Imperium requires a steady supply of fanatically loyal servants, individuals who will sacrifice everything